Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from New York. I'm William Denslow and these are the headlines. NATO says sanctions have hurt Russia's ability to make advanced weapons because some of the components for the weapon systems actually came from Western industries. China's President Xi Jinping calls for regional countries to reshape the international order at the SCO summit in Uzbekistan, touted as a challenge to Western global influence. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has met Turkish President Erdogan on the sidelines of the SCO summit in Uzbekistan, where the two leaders discussed ways to deepen bilateral cooperation in diverse sectors. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will travel to Armenia following deadly border clashes with neighbouring Azerbaijani forces. A jersey worn by basketball legend Michael Jordan during Game 1 of the 1998 NBA Finals, his last title victory, sells at Sotheby's auctioneers for a record $10.1 million. With the November midterms approaching, migrant politics has once again taken centre stage in the United States. On Thursday, two buses carrying migrants and asylum seekers arrived near the residence of Vice President Kamala Harris. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said the state of Texas will continue to send migrants like this in the incident until the White House comes up with strict policies to secure the border. Texas has sent more than 7,000 migrants to Washington, D.C. and New York City since April. The move has been slammed by the Biden administration. The White House press secretary accused Republicans of using migrants as a political pawn.
There's a process in place. We have had a process in place. There's a legal way of doing this. For managing migrants, Republican governors interfering in that process and using migrants as political pawns is shameful, is reckless, and just plain wrong.
The incident comes shortly after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis sent migrants to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Speaking at a rally on Thursday, DeSantis defended his decision to send migrants to the wealthy island. He also took credit for the two flights organised from San Antonio, Texas, that flew the migrants.
Those people in D.C. and New York were beating their chests when Trump was president, saying they were so proud to be sanctuary jurisdictions, saying how bad it was to have a secure border. The minute even a small fraction of what those border towns deal with every day is brought to their front door, they all of a sudden go berserk, and they're so upset that this is happening. And it just shows you, their virtue signaling is a fraud, okay?
His comments came after Massachusetts Governor Dylan Fernandez called DeSantis a coward for his actions.
The governor of one of the largest states in the country not spending his time working for the people of Florida on the many issues they have there, and there are many issues in the state of Florida, and instead spending his time hatching a secret plot to use women, children, families as political pawns, herding them onto airplanes. I've talked to attorneys who say this is human trafficking. Also, he can get on Fox News and jump on Tucker Carlson and beat his chest about how strong he is on immigration. He's a coward. Governor DeSantis is a coward. It's not using women and children for your own political gain, is cowardice.
A volunteer working with NGOs that are tasked with caring for migrants said the coalition of organisations had no idea the plan was for the bus to drop off those migrants at the Vice President's residency. Some volunteers say many of the migrants did not know where they were headed.
They thought they were coming from Texas to Boston. And that from before Texas, it was about a 2-month journey to get to the United States. And they were expecting to come to Martha's Vineyard Community Services. They were told that they would have a job and they would have housing, and we had a program for them, basically.
Experts say the Republican move can be challenged in the courts, but it's still not clear which laws were specifically broken. Meanwhile, speaking at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute Gala, President Joe Biden said the Republicans should refrain from using such political stunts.
Republican officials should not interfere with that process by waging these political stunts. It's long overdue for Senate Republicans to come to the table and provide a pathway for citizenship for dreamers, those on temporary status, farm workers, and essential workers. We need to modernize our laws so businesses get workers they need and families don't have to wait decades to be brought back together. It's time to get it done.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by US correspondent Susan Tafrani, joining us live from New York City. Susan, what exactly can be done when it comes to resolving this? And as the president says, is it likely that Republicans will come to the table?
So there are a couple of issues regarding this. The first issue is that, as we see in these sound bites from the Biden administration, one after the other, what's lacking is really not telling migrants to not cross and make this dangerous journey into the United States illegally. Not once have they said, don't come into the United States illegally, do not cross our borders. Another issue is that the Biden administration, Joe Biden himself, has been sending busloads of illegal migrants, overnight planes as well, into New York and Washington, D.C. for the past 12 to 18 months. However, what has happened now is that because there has been an overload of illegal migrants in a lot of these border cities, the Republicans want to draw attention to it, and it is close to the midterms. It may be something that their constituents want to draw attention to as well. Now they're doing it as well, so it becomes sort of an election process. But the issue of taking migrants, illegal migrants, and transferring them to New York and Washington, D.C. and these northern liberal states is it's nothing new. The Democrats have been doing it for months right now, and it's something that has been overburdened, across the United States. So yes, America does have a broken immigration system, but unfortunately, what has happened with this administration is they halted a lot of the strict policies of the previous administration, and now who's benefiting are the drug cartels, are the human trafficking cartels, and these migrants tell one another, as we hear in sound bites, that America's borders are open. The wall is not being built anymore, and anyone can go in and be welcomed and ultimately, get a job, so on and so forth. So, a lot of issues are at play right now.
Absolutely. Susan, thank you so much. Stay with us. We're hoping to speak to you a little later in the show. Now, a US judge has appointed a third-party independent arbiter to sift through thousands of documents seized at former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. District Judge Eileen Cannon appointed Raymond Deary, a veteran New York jurist, as the special master in the Trump documents probe. Deary has until the 30th of November to go through the entire set of documents. The Department of Justice has also accepted the third-party reviewer chosen by the Trump team. The federal judge has blocked the Justice Department from resuming its investigation. It said that the documents were seized from Trump's Florida estate in an FBI search on the 8th of August. In her ruling, Judge Cannon said the court does not find it appropriate to accept the government's conclusions on these important and disputed issues without further review by a neutral third party in an expedited and orderly fashion. The judge said she doesn't buy the DOJ claims national security could be a risk, and she believes there is the possibility that the former president could raise valid claims of privilege over at least some of the records. The special master is responsible for reviewing nearly 11,000 documents seized from the Trump estate, including the classified files. He will also be segregating documents that might be covered by executive or attorney-client privilege. Now, Susan Tafrani joins us for more on this. Susan, just how much of a blow is this to the DOJ?
So in terms of halting, as you mentioned, clearly this sort of criminal investigation for some time, it is a blow to the DOJ. The DOJ is expected to ultimately appeal, as they've said. But, it is a victory for Mr. Trump, but it's important to note that she also made two significant concessions to the government. And if you don't mind, I'll just say those very briefly, and I'll read off them so I'm very clear on them. She said, for instance, that the special master should first look at the classified documents and, quote, thereafter consider prompt adjustment to the court's necessary orders. And what that raises is that the special master basically can quickly, one after the other, clear these items for the FBI and not wait for a very long time to clear them and then altogether give them to the FBI. So one material after the other can be given to the FBI, and then the criminal investigation can continue. That's sort of a snippet of that. And then also Judge Cannon clarified that the temporary ban on the Justice Department, for example, is only regarding asking witnesses and going through the documents. They could continue with other aspects of the investigation as well. So while, yes, it is a blow to the government on the one side and a victory for Donald Trump in sort of giving him more time, the Justice Department in a lot of aspects can continue with its investigation, so to say, more or less.
Susan, thank you very much for getting us up to speed on both these major topics in the US. We appreciate it. That's our correspondent, Susan Tafrani, in New York City. Now, the fears of recession are hovering over the world once again. The World Bank has warned the world may be edging towards a global recession as central banks continue to hike interest rates to combat persistent inflation. The world's three largest economies, the US, China and the Eurozone, has been slowing sharply, and even a moderate hit to the global economy over the next year could tip it into recession, the bank said in a new study. The institution also added that the global economy was now in its steepest slowdown following a post-recession recovery since 1970, and consumer confidence had already dropped more sharply than in the run-up to the previous global recessions. Some factors that can bring relief are the lessening of the supply disruptions and labour market pressures that can bring down the global core inflation rate, excluding energy. And to drive inflation lower, central banks may need to raise interest rates by an additional 2 percentage points on top of the 2 percentage points increased already seen over the 2021 average. However, another global financial institution, the IMF, is predicting a further global economic slowdown in the third quarter. However, the agency clarified it's too early to say if there will be a widespread global recession. Continued high inflation, supply chain problems and tighter financial market conditions are worsening the economic situation across continents, leading to a revision in economic growth forecasts. The IMF also added that continued COVID-19 lockdowns and real estate issues were weighing on economic activity in China, while the strengthening dollar had implications for many countries. Asian markets closed with losses today as investors brace for a US rate hike next week, amid growing concerns of a global recession following warnings from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. European markets are also trading weaker on global worries. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi says new solutions are needed to thwart America's sanctions against the West Asian country. While speaking at the ongoing SCO summit, Raisi called for an expansion of free trade among the SCO's member countries, along with financial and banking cooperation. He said, and I quote, "The SCO needs to adopt new solutions and take specific measures to counter draconian US sanctions and its unilateralism." The development comes as efforts to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear pact hit another stalemate. Former President Donald Trump pulled out of the JCPOA in 2018 and imposed crippling economic sanctions on Tehran. Meanwhile, earlier this week, Iran signed a memorandum of obligations and became a member of the Asian grouping. Iran's membership has raised concerns in the US. Western analysts say the SCO is emerging as an anti-West body. The Kremlin, on the other hand, says the group does not seek to become an alternative to Western unions. On Thursday, Russia's President Vladimir Putin held a bilateral with Iran's president, where he said the ties between the two countries are developing positively. Pope Francis has deviated from the Vatican's long-standing policy of staying neutral and said that it was morally acceptable to supply weapons to Ukraine so it can defend itself. The pontiff made this statement while on a flight back from the Kazakh capital Nur-Sultan. He spoke of the difference between moral and immoral reasons to supply weapons.
Ma può essere immorale se si fa con l'intenzione di provocare più guerra o di vendere le armi o scartare quelle armi che a me non servono più. La motivazione è quella che in gran parte qualifica la moralità di quest'atto, no? E difendersi è non solo licito, anche un'espressione di amore alla patria, no? Chi non si difende, chi non difende qualcosa non la ama, invece chi difende ama.
Pope Francis also criticised the global arms industry and its effect on society.
La fabbrica delle armi, no? Ma questo è un negoziato assassino. Qualcuno mi diceva, che capisce le statistiche, che se si lasciassero per un anno di fare le armi si risolverebbe tutta la fame del mondo, no? Non so se è vero o no, ma fame, educazione, niente, non si può perché si deve fare le armi.
The Pope, however, maintained that Kyiv should engage in dialogue with Moscow if the challenge presents itself. The comments came as he returned from a 3-day trip to Kazakhstan, where the Pope had participated in an interfaith conference attended by faith leaders from 60 countries. The meeting promoted interfaith dialogue as a means to help heal the world's ills, including war. Here in New York, in an effort as part to bring about more awareness about the Holocaust, museums will now be required to identify and disclose artworks and pieces stolen from Jews during World War II, with special signage and descriptions for items that have not yet been repatriated or reclaimed. Here's that report.
During the Second World War, the Nazis left no stone unturned to try and wipe out Jewish culture and memorabilia. And as part of this effort, some 600,000 pieces of artwork were looted from the Jewish people. As the last generation of survivors slowly starts to dwindle, a significant number of these pieces and artworks remain unclaimed. But for many heirs of the survivors, these could potentially be the only remaining connection to their past.
People should be aware that of the terrible cost to people during World War II as these confiscations took place, and how people's treasures that they loved and that had been in their families were torn from them at the same time that the rest of their lives were being disrupted, and that we should honor their memory by letting people know that we recognize that these objects have within them this sense of the tragic moment that they have gone through.
New York is now attempting to reconcile. For the pieces that remain in museums, a new law has been passed. All museums must now put up special signs to identify the pieces from the Nazi loot from 1933 through 1945. This is to bring in more awareness and to ensure that the public continues to be educated about the Holocaust. And to that effect, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York has identified 53 such works.
So for us, we have traced about 53 such works in our collection, and they are online in our collections area of our website. Those are the works that we can say we know were stolen during World War II, but the original families got them back, and in a later period, they came into our collection. And those would be the ones that we would be bringing to people's attention through this new law.
The hope is that this new law will afford these pieces the recognition they deserve, and to bring to fore the stories these pieces hold, and in some cases, to even return them to their rightful owners. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
If you're a parent, you would understand how difficult it is to protect your child in a digital world. Social media addiction is becoming more commonplace. Teenagers are among the biggest consumers of social media. According to a new study, primary school children are losing 1 full night's sleep a week. Why? Because they stay up late on social media sites. Almost 70% of the children involved in the study say they use social media for 4 hours or more a day. Most of them even say this includes the 2 hours just before bedtime. However, if you live in California, there's help at hand. In California, social media companies could be held responsible for harming children. California signed a new law that requires social media companies to consider children's health and well-being. It's called the California Age Appropriate Design Code Act. The new law requires companies like Facebook, Instagram and TikTok to study products that have features that could be accessed by minors. They have to mitigate any potential harm before releasing new features to the children. Not just this, companies need to craft their privacy policies in such language that even kids can understand. If the companies violate these rules, they could be fined up to $7,500 per impacted child. The new law will come into effect in July 2024. Social media companies are opposing it. They argue differing state laws regulate their apps, and this would make compliance difficult. The jersey worn by basketball icon Michael Jordan during the opening game of the 1998 NBA Finals has been sold for a record $10.1 million. The jersey holds a special place in the hearts of Jordan's fans. famously known as The Last Dance, as he played his last season with the Chicago Bulls. And that's all we have time for on this edition of WION Live Broadcast. I'm William Denslow. Stay tuned on WION for the latest global updates. We'll be back on Monday.
This is great, Arab.